Welcome to I Hate James Dobson. Dob, what have you done? You're a psychologist, but your work is so dumb. Fuck Dobson.
At what hour of the night did you write that?
That's not important, nor is what substances may or may not have been in my body at the time. Welcome to I Hate James Dobson. My name is Jake. I'm a former evangelical turned queer sex therapist. And today I am quite pleased to be joined by the quirky, quick-witted, quotable, quintessential queen who quenches my quaint quizzicalities, Brooke. Hi, Brooke.
Hi. Good job with the cues.
Thank you.
What are you going to do when we get through the alphabet?
I haven't decided.
Then we have to go into numbers.
Or
Isn't that a Bible chapter?
Numbers is a book of the Bible, yeah.
Okay.
And today, we are also joined by the extra special guest, the host of the fabulous podcast, Lessons from the Couch, my boss, and most importantly to me, my friend, Corina.
Hi.
Hi, Corina.
Nice to be here.
Hi, Corina.
Hey.
Also my boss and my friend.
Corina, thank you so much for being here with us. We've been trying to get you on the show for a second now.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I like to say I am your biggest fan.
Absolutely. I feel most supported by you. You and Kevin, I think, are neck and neck there.
Delightful. Delightful.
Before we dig into the world of Dobson, let's be avoidant for a second. Tell us about your podcast, Lessons from the Couch.
Well, thank you. Lessons from the Couch is I would say, labor of love too, but really probably more fun for me than it is for you, Jake. Mariana and I just chat with therapists. So far, it's mostly therapists about the world of therapizing, what it's like on the inside. Our goal has been to bring people into deep conversations, let people know it's maybe more accessible than they think.
Yeah, I love that. And where can people find this podcast?
Thank you. On all the same platforms that you can find this amazing podcast. All the things. Spotify, Apple. There's at least 5 others and I can't remember. But thank you. Thanks for plugging it.
And how has it been for you to step into this world of podcasting?
Honestly, I should say that this podcast, I Hate James Dobson, and listening to it religiously, as I like to say, has made me feel like I could finally leap into the world of podcasting, which I thought might be a cool way for me to share something about what this world of being a therapist would be like. But you, Jake, and Brooke really did make it feel accessible to me. It's a hilarious thing to feel like I know you both pretty well anyways, and I know you more than you know I know by listening to your podcast. So being on the other side, we have a much smaller audience thus far, but I say to Mariana every time, I don't really care if anybody listens to it. I'm just really glad to be having these conversations. So I welcome you to join us on the couch sometime if you want.
Yay.
It's excellent. I've listened to, I don't think the latest one yet, but I listened to a lot of them and they're really good. They're really interesting, engaging discussions.
Yeah, thanks. And Jake is going to join us soon.
Yes.
Ooh,
Yes, I am.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Next week?
Yes.
Is when
soon.
I'm recording.
Sometime soon.
Yeah. And just tell us a little bit about you as a therapist. What kind of therapy do you do?
That's a great question. I'm never really very good with this question, but I am trained as a marriage and family therapist. I am also trained in EMDR. So I would say I'm a good person to come to for trauma and systems work. I have found that my clinical work both leads and follows my own identity development. So I have a lot of folks who work with me who have ADHD. Me too. Many of them didn't know they had ADHD when we started. Same here. I work with couples and families. It's pretty wide ranging. But I would say some of the most fun stuff for me about my job is being a supervisor. And oddly enough, running this business, I actually find pretty fun and pretty interesting for my neurodiverse brain.
I love it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate how specific you are in all the things that I see you do. You're very intentional with it. And all of those things are why I'm very excited to have you on our show today.
Yay!
Before we get to that, I want to introduce a new segment to the show. You see, you readers always have such interesting and thoughtful responses to Brooke's literary adventures.
Oh, God.
Ooh.
What is this?
So now it's time for Brooke's Books.
Woo!
The part of the show where Brooke tells us about hopefully less traumatizing books.
I'm so happy with doing
I
this.
love this.
I thought you were kidding.
Nope. 100%
This is a
serious.
gift. Thank you.
It's a gift.
Readers, I am someone who reads 97 books at once.
Mm-hmm.
And so
ADHD?
What'd you say?
ADHD.
I do not have ADHD, Corina.
That's what
Very
they say.
normal brain.
That's what they say.
I am reading so many books right now.
Mm-hmm.
I am reading The Anomaly by Yves Letellier, which is super fun to say because it's French.
Mhm.
It's so good.
Mm.
Everyone go get it right now. It's sci-fi, but it's really more about like the humans. The Anomaly by Yves Letellier. I'm still reading Children of Men. Nope.
Children
of Time. I'm still on page 7.
My question is, did you get to the spiders or whatever?
Listen, I trust all of you that it's going to get better. I've been,
What's happening?
well, it's a sci-fi book about spiders that my book club is forcing me to read.
Mm-hmm.
And I am engaging with my book club by pretending like I know what's happening and then giving plots of other books like
Amazing.
Pride and Prejudice.
Amazing.
I was like, oh, I just got to the part where the spider proposed to the other spider, but she thinks he's too proud. They appreciate it and they don't. I'm gonna read it. I've heard it's very good. I understand. Okay. I'm also reading The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. Guess we're in a French phase. And I definitely mansplained it to Jake this week, and it was a humbling moment for me. I sent a photo. I was like, you should check out this book. Want me to tell you who Albert Camus is? And Jake was like, I definitely have read all of those books.
She was humbled. She told me this yesterday.
Yeah.
I kind of went through an existential crisis in 2020.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I'm reading Middlemarch by George Eliot. I started it in the middle of March with my mom because I thought that would be funny. Joke's on me. It's the longest book ever. And I'm reading, what's the one we're reading? Decolonizing Therapy.
Mm.
Reading
Chapter
that.
7. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm definitely on chapter 7. And the last one is Why Do We Get Sick is the new book that I'm reading now because chronic illness, babies. If any of
Interesting.
you have that, check it out. Or don't. I'm on page 1. Wait till I get a little farther along.
It's not a recommendation yet.
Yeah, not yet. And that's where I am in Brooke's books. Thanks for joining.
I love this.
Brooke's books. But really, The Anomaly by Yves Letellier. That's the one to go to right now.
We will check in every other episode because we record at 2 episodes at
Yeah,
once.
it'll just be the same thing next time.
So join us in a month from now.
I appreciate Jake shares with me what you all write only when it's nice. So I have this fantasy version that I'm just beloved. And I appreciate all the feedback that I should stick with the spiders. I promise I will. I did buy all 3 books because it's buy 2, get 1 free. So I'm
Wow.
in it for the long haul. I'm waiting for them to write some pig in the web and call it a day.
Charlotte.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So our focus today is unfortunately by James Dobson.
Boo.
But calling this piece of work a book would be generous. This book clocks in at just over 100 pages, and the pages are small and the font is big. It's more of a glorified pamphlet more than anything. And this book is also Dobson's least objectionable book so far, in my opinion. And I think this is in large part due to the book's brevity. Like, he still gets things wrong, and it is not good. I don't recommend it. But there are parts where he doesn't advocate for child abuse, for instance. It's positive. I wanted to start this blog because I feel rather specially located to read and critique James Dobson. Not only did I grow up in the cultic culture he created, our careers have a rather notable degree of overlap. Sometimes too much overlap, and I try not to think about the fact that I basically just made my own radio show. This book by Dobson is giving general advice about marriage and relationships. As a marriage and family therapist who does a lot of relationship therapy, I've rarely felt more professionally engaged in Dobson's work than with this book. Our book today,
Here it comes. Corina, this is a pivotal moment.
I'm ready.
5 Essentials for Lifelong Intimacy,
Oh, boy.
published in 2005.
Gross.
Yeah,
I can already tell it's gross.
there's not a ton of sticky notes in this one, which is nice.
Readers, there are a ton of
A
sticky
bevy,
notes.
one might say. A bevy.
I find it really interesting where he is right, where he is wrong, and where he is both right and wrong at once. We get peeks at the fucked up underlying philosophies in Dobson's worldview throughout this book, but a good deal of it is decent, if really basic advice. A blind squirrel finds a nut, etc.
What?
A blind squirrel finds a nut. I don't know.
What is the rest of that one? Do you know?
I have no idea.
I don't know either.
Oh, the blind squirrel finds a nut twice a day? I don't know.
Maybe.
Okay.
I'm particularly excited to have Corina here for this episode as a marriage and family therapist, and a darn good one at that.
Thank you. I'm excited and terrified.
Before we get into like the meat of this, in the introduction, he cites a guy named Neil Warren. Do either of you know Neil Warren?
I do not.
I do not.
I didn't know, but I know you are familiar with his work. He founded eHarmony.
Oh.
Fascinating. I knew they had a Christian bent to them. Mm-hmm.
Warren was pretty close with Dobson for a while, and his appearances on Focus on the Family Media created the original marketing base for eHarmony.
Wow.
It's mostly unrelated to this episode, but wow, yet another thing that Dobson birthed into this world.
Mm-hmm.
Gross.
So there's 5 essentials in this book. It's called 5 Essentials for Lifelong Intimacy. There are 5 chapters. We're going to go through them bit by bit. The first tip that he has for lifelong intimacy is a Christ-centered home. So you know how I did a whole bit about how this book has a decent amount of good advice?
Mm-hmm.
Throw that out for this chapter. Spirituality can be very important in building relationships, especially in an intimate long-term partnership. But Dobson writes from a Christian supremacist point of view. Quote, when a husband and wife are deeply committed to Jesus Christ, they enjoy enormous advantages over a family with no spiritual dimension. Everything rests on that foundation. Only through spiritual connection with him can we experience genuine love and begin to fulfill all of the potential of the relationship we call marriage.
What?
The things that stand out to me, only through a spiritual connection can we experience genuine love.
Mm-hmm. Everything else is fake, to be clear, according to them. Yeah.
It is worse. It is less than.
Mm-hmm.
Again, sharing spiritual beliefs is important to many people. Also, interfaith marriages are real and good and valid and fair. It's the only Christian marriages experience genuine love that I object to.
Mm-hmm.
This is contrasted later with a section about prayer. He says, quote, there's something special about prayer between a husband and wife and God that can't be found elsewhere. It creates a spiritual connection, accountability, and a holy bond that brings strength and stability to the relationship. So again, I don't agree with necessarily the hierarchy that he arbitrarily creates. As if you're praying with your spouse, you're doing less good at relationships. But prayer with your partner does create a special bond that I don't think can be replicated by other means. It is its own joy. Surviving a global pandemic also creates a rather unique bond.
Yeah.
Going to the local bathhouse creates a unique bond. It's not necessarily better or worse than other types of bonds, but it is its own thing. That's pretty much all I have to say about this chapter. While I respect the role that spirituality plays for many people in relationships, I simply cannot be convinced that to have a good marriage, you must have a Christ-centered home, as defined by James Dobson.
Yeah, I mean, it's like sharing a common interest or belief or value with your spouse creates a special bond.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Including religion or anything else.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because I was socialized into a context where some parts of this ideology were definitely there. And it makes me think about, I think you've referred to this on the podcast, the idea that like if people don't have religion, they're going to be like, they would have no motivation to be good.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely like got that sense. And I think it like instilled in me a certain kind of fear of people who had other, who were like rooted outside of religion. And then of course, in my life, thank goodness, I have had so many chances to be exposed to so many people and learned that there are many foundations for connection, many foundations for your connection to kindness, lovingness, goodness, whatever. Yeah. But this reminds me of that in that it instills fear in people. So then they pursue a thing, a relationship. What's the lingo? Founded in Jesus or something. But from this like anxiety place, not from a rooted sense of clarity about like, who am I and what do I want? And I just see that go so poorly so often.
Yeah. It reminds me of the public school fear.
Yes.
Right, that we talked about last time. Where it's like, you have to be homeschooled. You have to have these same values. You can't be somewhere else, exposed to something else.
Absolutely. I don't know that this was an actual thing that was said. It's often gets shared on like angry atheist internet corners, but essentially it's a priest being asked like, why is God okay with atheists? Like, why did God make atheists? And the priest says something to the effect of, you can learn from them. There are people who do good just for its own sake. They're not expecting anything in this life or the next. And once I moved away from that sense of fear motivating these things, being able to like tap into people's value system, I also want a lot more connection with people.
Totally. Mm-hmm. Totally.
So we're 0 for 1
okay.
so far.
Great.
Tip number 2, a lifelong commitment. Now we're getting to interesting stuff. On the surface, I agree that commitment in a long-term relationship is important. Knowing that someone is by your side, is in it with you, is willing to be there even when things get tough and through the ups and downs of a relationship. That's huge. That's important. I'm less sold on the lifelong part. Put a pin in that. Why is commitment so important? Dobson doesn't say, really. By way of explanation, he offers this, quote, perfection doesn't exist. You have to approach the first few years of marriage with a learner's permit to work out your incompatibilities. It is a continual effort. So commitment creates stability is his argument, I think. It just kind of takes it for granted that he says commitment is important. He also specifically focuses on those first few years of marriage. He says they are hard because it's a power struggle. Quote, that honing process usually occurs within the first few years of marriage. What often happens at this time is a dramatic struggle for power in the relationship. Who will lead? Who will follow? Who will determine how money is spent? Who will get his way or her way in times of disagreement? Everything is up for grabs in the beginning, and the way that these early decisions are made will set the stage for the future. I don't know. Yeah?
Except he's already many times made it clear that there's only one way.
Right. The unspoken thing is here, it's clear to Dobson men need to win these power struggles.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess in his worldview, like, if a woman wins in the early years, then the relationship's fucked. God forbid we have, like, an equitable distribution. I mean, it's not a collaboration, it's a power struggle.
It's super interesting because as a person who's been married many years, in theory, I'm like, yes, the power struggle of the early years, not so much marriage per se, but the early years of partnership are a real thing.
Yeah.
I'm just like curious where it's going to go from here because I'm like, but then what? You know, but then what? What happens depending upon what happens with that power struggle? Yeah.
He doesn't get into it in this book.
Interesting.
And I think this is why it's the least objectionable to me, where it's like, ooh, that's the start of a bad thing. But he doesn't have time to make it worse.
Totally. Because I think, you've referred to this in other episodes. This is what gets people in abusive relationships in really bad spots, is this sense of, I'm supposed to keep waiting. We're just in the power struggle. There's no nuance, you know?
People come to therapy often in times of transition where the rules that they established don't work for them anymore. So it is very possible to change that dynamic of a relationship if it is set up in ways that are not great for you at the start of it.
Absolutely.
He writes in such fatalistic ways.
Totally.
So what interrupts this commitment? Dobson says, emotions.
Oh boy.
Quote, and yes, Virginia, there are times...
Is that his wife's name again? I can't remember.
No.
He takes my beautiful, beloved Christmas letter that I did a whole Christmas special about, and he shits all over it.
It's not reclamation if you just take it. And yes, Virginia, there are times in every good marriage where a husband and wife don't like each other very much. There are even occasions when they feel as though they will never love their partner again. The problem lies in that word, feel. The feeling of love is simply too ephemeral to hold a relationship together for very long. It comes and goes. Emotions are like that. They flatten out occasionally, like an automobile tire with a nail in the tread. Dobson's saying feelings can't be trusted. We talked about this on our episode Straight Talk to Men. He's saying relationships based on feelings are necessarily transitory. Emotions are, in fact, inevitable liars that will conform to our worst fears in the absence of supporting evidence. Don't worry, he's not saying that you shouldn't feel emotions, just that you have to compartmentalize them and put them in their place. Quote, I am not denying the importance of feelings in our human relationships, but we must understand that emotions are unreliable and at times tyrannical. They should never be permitted to dominate us. I can see a point there, but in a vacuum, I think there's some sense to that. But this chapter doesn't exist in a vacuum. He just talked about how his version of Christianity is the only thing that lets marriages flourish. Essentially, Dobson is saying, without Jesus, you are likely just with someone because they make you feel good. They won't always make you feel good, and so after that, what are you left with? And no, I don't think people are in relationships solely because the other person makes them feel good. It is good and important to feel positively in your relationships, yes. But most people I know actually err on the other side. They are too willing to say, sometimes relationships are hard, and ignore their own emotions, kind of like you were saying. Yeah,
totally. You two always talk about how sticky the things he says are. And it's so sticky because there's a thing he's saying that I think is valid, which is people do focus too much on, when it comes to the word love, thanks to bell hooks, I think the way we think about the word love and the way he's talking about is about a feeling, an internal experience, which, is like the intensity of liking someone or something. And I would agree that ebbs and flows.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't say anything about what it looks like to be loving. And I think I was maybe just talking to Brooke about this, about how often when I'm meeting with women, and this, crosses race, gender, sexuality, religion, when I'm meeting with women, often I'm talking about what are the ways that the person you're talking about, whoever you're partnered with, shows love. What does it look like for them to be loving? And to what extent are you and your partner talking about what it looks like to be loving? Because I'm kind of like, who cares about the feeling if you're not talking about what it looks like? And the feeling gets rejuvenated through gestures of love and care. Yeah. And to me, when I say, do I love someone, I'm talking about, do I show love with my action? And he doesn't say anything about that. So it's like there's a part there that's interesting, and then the rest is like, fuck.
Absolutely.
That's right.
The other thing that I think a lot about, that I've taken with me even as I've deconstructed from evangelical Christianity, is that they talk a lot, or I was raised to talk a lot about different types of love, right? We've talked about this on the podcast before, I think, but there's like romantic love, there's eros, which is like where we get the word erotic, that's more like sensual, sexual love. There's philia, which is like brotherly love. And our society tends to think of love in this very narrow conception that's very like hearts and feelings. Love is so much more than that. Mm-hmm. And none of that nuance is in this book. Also, like, this book is short. It doesn't have a lot of room for nuance. That's by his own choice. No one made him.
Absolutely. On purpose.
Also, it's again this idea of like, don't trust your feelings.
Yes.
Right? This idea of like keeping everyone in the fold, mm-hmm. right? Because, okay, you might have this feeling of questioning things or not believing or whatever, but you can't trust that. Mm-hmm. Right?
According to Dobson, marriages are forever.
Right.
And I do think there is, if you have a lifelong marriage, that is amazing. And I love that for you. And for people who want that, I want that for you. And Dobson says you should always stay in that marriage no matter what. The Bible only has one exception to marriage, and that's adultery. Not abuse, mm-hmm. not any of these other things, just if your partner cheats on you. And including if it turns out they're not the person you thought they were and you end up hating them.
Yeah.
I think that's a very valid reason
mm-hmm.
to end a relationship, but not here. Sometimes you have to consider your feelings.
Yeah.
So half a point. I give that one half a point.
I also just feel like, how is it possible to speak for your future self in that way?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, how could I possibly say I will love you forever to anybody?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's something that my spouse and I have talked about a million times, that we made these sort of big gestures in terms of words when we got married that had no context on who we were going to become and the things that we were going to need over time. And that like this idea of committing forever, it doesn't really even make sense. An idea of like commitments to each other makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. A recheck-in, some kind of reassessment phase makes sense to me. But now, like literally 20 years into being in a relationship with this person, it's like we are wildly different humans, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the joys of relationships is growing with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't always grow together. Sometimes
Totally.
you grow apart, even in the best circumstances. It just happens.
Totally.
I'm also very much of the belief that just because a relationship ends doesn't mean that it fails.
Totally.
Right.
100%. Mm-hmm. Often when people tell me they've gotten divorced, I'm like, congratulations. And often people are like, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Not always. Sometimes they're like, whatever. But sometimes they're very happy because the process of getting to a place of divorcing often is so fraught and so painful and so challenging.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean a waste of years of your life. It's just sort of moving into a different phase.
Absolutely.
You know, every case is different, but it's not about like, oh, okay, I feel differently, so I'm not going to try.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just about, like, again, like, I don't know what circumstances will be in place or who I'll be or what's going to be going on when I'm 20 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Tip 3, a deep and abiding trust. Quote, relationships dominated by fear and insecurity will never reach their full potential. The marriages founded on trust and safety will flourish. Yes.
Yeah, but it's a trap.
It's very funny to me that his whole thing is power and control through fear.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But fear and security. Yeah, really.
I want to pause for a moment and turn to another name in marriage therapy, the Gottmans.
Mm.
Brooke, do you know anything about the Gottmans?
I sure do. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Yeah. Editing Jake here, We kind of breeze past this point. The Gottmans identify 4 different patterns of communication that are particularly problematic in relationships. They call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. They're criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. It's a little bit beside our point for the episode today, but that's what we're talking about when we talk about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Okay, back to the show. So the Gottmans are a married couple, John and Julie, and they are currently like the big name in relationship therapy. They even developed a style of therapy, the Gottman method, which is trademarked by them. I have, shall we say, complicated feelings about the Gottmans, but that's not our focus today. I do think they have some useful frameworks for relationship therapy. For instance, they believe that a huge predictor in the future success of a relationship is how often partners answer each other's bids for connection. So your partner is sitting across the room reading the newspaper and goes, huh. If you go, what is that? That's a bid for connection that's being answered. If your partner sends you TikToks, are you watching them and responding to them? Those are answering bids for connections. Those little things that Gottman say really show the strength of a relationship. They also say that in conflict, you should try to have 5 positive interactions for every 1 difficult one. That 5-to-1 ratio purportedly helps maintain connection. Turning towards each other is their language, even in times of difficulty. Those numbers feel fake to me, but the logic behind them is okay.
Sure.
So, neat, but why am I bringing up the Gottmans here? Well, we should talk about their sound relationship house.
Ooh, something else is coming out of the bag.
I printed out the sound relationship house.
Wow, I love
Thank
the visual.
you.
Oh, I love visuals for a podcast.
Don't you mean a blog?
So the Gottmans have a framework to look at the health of the relationship called the sound relationship house. Think of it sort of as I can never say his name right. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need first to know each other before you can resolve conflict. And you have to be able to resolve conflict before you can make life dreams come true, etc. Holding up the house, says the Gottman, are the 2 pillars, trust and commitment. These are 2 of the 5 essentials that Dobson identifies. I think this is correct. Although, again, when we dig deeper, we see how Dobson is more technically correct than anything else. That's all these handouts are for, just for the visual.
Great.
So Dobson is only kind of correct. He says you should build trust with words and actions. Your partner can trust that you won't belittle them verbally, which, yeah, that's good. That's important. Mm-hmm. But his focus is overwhelmingly to build trust that you won't cheat on your partner. He's very focused on infidelity. Quote, the surest way to avoid an affair is to flee temptation as soon as it confronts you. Author Jerry B. Jenkins of Left Behind fame.
Oh, boy.
Jerry B.
has referred to this determination to preserve moral purity as building hedges around a marriage, so temptation is never given a foothold. I agree that trust is important, and trust that your partner will agree to the contours of the relationship is good, but this feels so limited. Mm-hmm. So, according to the Gottmans, trust is what you feel and commitment is what you do. Mm-hmm. Commitment is taking your partner with you wherever you go, they say. Trust is about attunement. Commitment is about choice. It's about choosing the relationship day after day. Trust is believing that your partner has your best interest at heart. I think that's valid. I have a different take, though. I don't think of trust as a singular thing that you have or not. There's an overall sense of trust in a relationship, sure, but you can trust people differently on different things. I've seen couples in therapy where infidelity isn't the issue, but finances are. One partner doesn't trust the other person to spend responsibly, even if they trust them not to cheat on them.
Totally.
Also, going back to what we were saying about love, I think trust is both a feeling and an action. If you've been cheated on before, you might feel like you can't trust your current partner, but you can choose to trust them anyway. It's a very vulnerable space to be, but if/when they come through, it can go a long way to build that feeling of trust. Trust is built in small moments. It is a cushion in times of tension, a buffer when faced with friction. And I believe trust with your partner is also grounded in trust of yourself. Mm. Just because you feel distrustful doesn't mean that your partner is necessarily behaving that way. We can project our own insecurities onto others, especially those with whom we are close. It helps create the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Totally.
Yeah, I think people sometimes confuse trust and loyalty, right? Mm-hmm. And that idea of like adultery and trust. But trust can be about, right, like, I think I work with clients sometimes where it's like the partner says that they'll do something all the time, but they don't ever do it. And then the client loses trust in the person, right? Mm-hmm. Which isn't really about loyalty.
Totally. Dr. Jax Black, who has done a bunch of consultation with us over the years, had in the early years of our consultation had me do this trust exercise that basically gets at like, what are my trust factors, so that as a leader, just like potentially in partnership, I can be clear with the people who are working with me. What are the things that would poke at my sense of trust in the relationship? What are the things that I'm looking for? To me, again, it's an exercise of self-accountability. How do I know myself enough to be able to share with my partner the things that I'm looking at that make me feel more trusting or not? I know for me in partnership, economic trust is more important than anything else for me. More important than potential sexual infidelity would be economic trustworthiness. And that's like a me thing, as you said.
Yeah. For me, based on especially a lot of my specifically religious trauma, it's really important that I can trust my partner will listen to me. When I was coming out, I felt so discarded by people and I felt so unheard by people that now it's like, if I feel like someone's really not listening to me, it's very quickly activating for me. Totally. You can disagree with me. That's fine. But are you actually trying to understand me? Totally. And without that trust, relationships of all kinds are not going to last particularly long for me.
Totally. Brooke, what's yours?
I think because of some of my disorganized attachment, I need to trust that my partner will like maintain their sense of self and their own life and their own interests and not be like absorbed into like relationship and into, you know what I mean? I mean, that sounds very like, oh, I'm so great. But like, but that idea of like having their own sphere, having their own sense of self. Right?
I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I talk so much in especially relationship therapy about differentiation, which is what that is, the ability to say you are a separate person than me and we're in a relationship together, but we are not the same person. The opposite of differentiation is enmeshment or codependency, kind of gets at the same topic. Trust and commitment don't inherently mean any one thing. They don't inherently mean anything. When I'm talking about these concepts, especially in therapy, I spend a lot of time creating these shared definitions, kind of like how we just did here. It means something different to us, but when we understand what it means for each other, we can better honor that for the other person and help build that sense of trust between us.
Look at all that nuance. That really would have helped James Dobson to be a different human.
This would have been a much thicker book.
Yeah.
That's true. Maybe we're better off.
For our next book, I literally ran out of sticky notes twice. So at least it saved me.
So get ready.
Saved me some stuff. Tip number 4, a willingness to communicate. It is almost a joke in the relationship therapy world that every couple comes in for communication issues. Yeah. It is very frequently put down as the reason people are coming to therapy. And while working on communication skills is important, it usually isn't the reason people are in therapy. They are struggling to communicate about something. This is the area where I found Dobson had probably the most actual good advice. I am capable of giving him credit where it's due. My caveat is that teaching communication skills is literally relationship therapy 101. These ideas are good, but they are by no means groundbreaking in any way. Things like, quote, time must be reserved for meaningful conversations. Taking walks, going out to breakfast, or riding bicycles on Saturday morning are fresh opportunities for conversations that help keep love alive. Yeah.
Nothing new, but yes.
Yeah. Wow, if you want to talk, you should make out time. I mean, some people need to hear that. So if that is helpful for you, I'm not trying to shame you, but like, he goes on for pages about this.
I thought you said make out time. I was like, that is an important one.
Also that, yes.
Even the good stuff has this like, but...
Every time.
He tells a parable of a pursuer-distancer relationship. A wife is constantly nagging her husband to try to get closer to him, to spend more time with him. And he is always distant. Eventually, she made the choice to be more distant herself. Quote, about a week after the change of manner was instituted, she said good night matter-of-factly and went to her room. About 30 minutes later, Frank threw open the door and turned on the light. He proceeded to make passionate love to her, later saying that he couldn't stand the barrier that had come between them.
Oh my gosh.
I hate when he tells a folksy little tale. I hate it so much.
It is so helpful, actually, because today, my memory is really a problem, but today I was talking to a person, and I can't remember who, might have been you, about the ways that women in this culture tend to have trouble knowing what our wants are, our needs are. And we were talking about the ways that we got here, and that one of the ways that we've been socialized over and over that we're not allowed to actually know what we need or ask what we need. So this is like a perfect example where she's not allowed to just say, like you were talking, Brooke, before about women asking for what they want over and over and not getting those needs met. So common to hear it all the time. She's not allowed to just say, hey, like this thing's not working for me. Can we talk about a new plan?
Right.
She has to act out the opposite of what she wants.
Right.
To get her need met. And he's like, well done.
Yes.
Well done.
That's also not pursuer distancer. That's passive aggressive.
Yes.
Right?
It's like both. You
Yeah.
know?
But like her being like, I'm going to trick you into like that is.
If it was consensual, it'd be cool. It'd be like, you know what? Oh, let's change this up. How about we both try to do a little bit of the opposite? It's totally a marriage and family therapy thing you might do. But to do it without it being spoken, he's like, yay, don't talk about it. Just figure out the problem, woman. Figure out the problem and fix it, obviously.
It also feels like what would happen in real life is a wife would read this, be like, oh, I need to give him space. And then he goes, oh, thank God she stopped nagging me. And that's
exactly. And now I want to have sex with you because you've left me alone.
And your whole goal is to be desirable to me.
Exactly.
Gross.
So the textbook answer to a pursuer distancer dynamic is for the pursuer to stop pursuing, give the distancer the space that they need, and be ready for them to re-engage when they are ready. This requires trust that the distancer will close that distance. And Corina, exactly like you were saying, it works a lot better when you know that that's what's happening.
Communication, consent, maybe.
It's much easier said than done, but I'm trying to give him credit, and I don't know why. But I'm trying to play nice, okay?
You are the most nuanced person in the room. I can guarantee that. Agreed.
Yeah. Why are you trying to give James Dobson credit?
Jake is just more nuanced.
You made a anybody podcast else called I Hate James Dobson.
More nuanced than anybody else I've ever met.
I think that it comes from, honestly, like this place of like, I don't feel listened to. I'm listening to you, dude, and I'm truly trying to understand. You're just wrong most of the time.
You really are so open to the possibility that he gets some things right. I'm very impressed.
I listen to you, Jake.
Thank you.
Usually once the podcast is published.
Typically Sunday at about 3 a.m.
Yeah. When I listen, I'm like, oh, wow, that's so interesting. Now I finally am hearing what you were saying.
I love knowing this about your love language. I'm like, I will work on slowing my ADHD self down so I can hear you, so I can listen.
I mean, part of it is the field that we are in, but I really feel listened to by our coworkers.
That's great.
And the people also, like, I've chosen people in my life who are emotionally mature and are able to do that listening.
Totally.
Not me.
Well, except for it, but that's fun to have. Spice it up. He also recommends something that he calls quick listening, which comes from a biblical thing. We should be quick to listen and slow to anger. So his parable is, after disagreement, a husband and wife sit down and explain their feelings about an issue. Quote, the catch is that the other spouse can't interrupt. Partners may try this and still disagree, but by giving their opinion and fully listening to their mates, they'll increase the chances of understanding each other and of staying best friends. This is close to one of the go-to skills I teach basically every couple in therapy. It's called reflective listening. In short, each person takes turn talking. And when you're listening to understand. And so when they finish speaking, you reflect back what you heard. What I heard you say is like the phrase to keep in mind. What I heard you say is you feel misunderstood. And then you check in. Is that right? Is that what you were trying to say? And only once they agree that you have heard them and what they are trying to say, are you allowed to respond and say your piece. And they have to listen to understand.
I'm almost mad when he gets something good. Not because he's getting something good, but because this is the stuff that pulls people in. They'll be like, James Dobson taught me to be a good listener or to be a reflective listener. It's like, yes, but all the other bullshit that hurts you, you know?
I think that is actually another part of the reason why I try to give him credit where it's due. Not to say like he's good at his job. He's actually quite bad at his job.
Totally.
But this is why people are pulled in. Most people who read James Dobson are not horrible, unforgivable monsters.
Absolutely.
They believe some pretty toxic things, but they believe it because it works well enough for them.
Yes.
It's also like then you can easily couch the weird stuff in the normal stuff.
Yes.
Totally.
So
like any grooming. Sorry.
Yes.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. Yeah, like here's this normal stuff from therapy and also live in a house of Christ.
So speaking of that, Dobson is still Dobson, and these pieces of good advice aren't simply good, or at least incomplete, and he ruins them with his usual bullshit. There is a lot of gender essentialism, especially in this chapter, about communication. Quote, one of the primary reasons for the communication troubles in marriage is a fundamental difference between males and females. Research makes it clear that most little girls are blessed with greater linguistic ability than most little boys, and remains a lifelong talent. Simply stated, she talks more than he does.
She be talking.
Bitches be talking. This is simply untrue. There have been many, many studies showing that this isn't true. What is true is that men perceive women to talk more. Similarly, when a room has an even gender split, men perceive there to be significantly more women. In general, though, people talk kind of roughly the same amounts. It's less determined by gender than other characteristics.
That's fascinating. I did not know the second piece. That's super interesting. That
when you are in the majority of a group and you're so used to being surrounded by people who look like you, when they're suddenly not, you are very aware of that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I wonder also, we're going to get some emails about this one, if it's that men aren't super interested in listening.
It's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they perceive women as talking a lot more. Right?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's also not just, wow, he's wrong about this fact. Gotcha. The tone he has for this chapter specifically largely blames women for the communication issues. Quote, inevitably, these differing assumptions collide head-on during the early years of marriages. At first, John tries to accommodate Diane. He doesn't use these names before. He's just starting in a parable in the middle of nowhere.
New names.
Do it.
At first, John tries to accommodate Diane. At other times, he becomes angry and they slug it out in a verbal brawl. He hates conflict with his wife and withdraws as a means of avoidance. What he needs most from his home, like the majority of men, is tranquility. Thus, he finds ways of escaping.
Mm-hmm. It's all about John.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, only men need tranquility in their home.
Mm-hmm. Diane is here for the chaos. She's really trying to bring the chaos.
Love to nag.
Diane, get back in the kitchen.
Another quote, for the wife who finds herself attacking an unresponsive man and driving him away, there's a method of drawing him in. It is accomplished by taking the pressure off of him, by avoiding the worn-out accusation and complaints, by showing him appreciation for what he does right, and for being fun to be with.
This is James Dobson as a Cosmo magazine from the 90s.
Yes!
How to draw him in.
They got their ideas from James Dobson, it turns out.
Happiness is a marvelous magnet to the human personality.
It's so interesting because the nagging dynamic, my perception as a marriage and family therapist, is that the dynamic that we're talking about here happens almost always after in relationships where women have actually been doing the thing he's suggesting for a really long time.
Yeah.
So very often women are indoctrinated into these ideas. And so they're like, we are really working on being caring people, showing care, being listeners, whatever. But it's all unspoken. It's not explicit. And that the pursuing what they're calling, what might be called nagging, happens after exhaustion because it's all unspoken. And
Yes.
so everybody was set up to fail from the start because of people like Dobson who are like, don't actually talk about it really. Just like figure it out. And woman, it's on you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
My note here is, you should smile more. You look so good when you smile.
Exactly.
Nowhere in this book, or nor in this chapter about communication, does he teach people how to actually communicate, right? There's this quick listening that I think gets the closest to it, but like, how do you actually communicate your emotions? How do you take time to think about what you want to say? Not just say, oh, I hate you, but like, okay, actually, I think I'm really upset about this thing that you did. None of those tips and tricks that would be pretty quick to at least write down are mentioned here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, give him a space. Stop nagging. Be tranquil.
Yeah, there's no actual communication.
No.
Weird.
And our fifth and final tip, an understanding of love.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with more gender essentialist bullshit. Quote, women are inclined to describe romance as the things their mate does to make them feel loved, protected, and respected. A man who shares in the duties of cooking, cleaning, and picking up the kids after basketball practice is much more likely to win the affection of his wife. Men, on the other hand, rely more on their senses in the area of romance. They appreciate a wife who makes herself as attractive to him as possible. A man wants to be respected, and even better yet, admired by his wife. He likes to hear his wife express genuine interest in his hobbies, opinions, and work. So instead of just saying, this is bad, although it is, I do think there is a hint of something useful here. That different people do value different expressions of love differently. The idea of the love languages is fucked, and we'll probably do an episode on it one day. It actually comes from like evangelical authors who really distort what...
It does.
Yes, please. I'll be listening for that one.
But some people do find physical touch to be a really important type of love expression in a relationship, more so than other people. Some people really do value acts of service. I think the gendered component is dumb, but it can be an in to helping people understand that others have different experiences.
Totally.
He's right here, but for the wrong reasons. So there's an early adventure of the radio drama Adventures in Odyssey, which is created by Focus on the Family, where the lesson to be learned is about having good motivations. Early in the episode, some of the characters play a game where you judge the motivation and the action. These aren't their examples, but curing cancer so you can get rich would be doing the right thing for the wrong reason, a right wrong. Similarly, stealing a loaf of bread for your family so they wouldn't starve would be, to Dobson at least, doing the wrong thing for the right reason, a wrong right. Here, and often throughout this book, Dobson is doing a right wrong. He's right about learning to communicate across different frames of reference, but he's wrong about it being like men and women, huh?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
There's a section in this chapter called The Art of Making Love.
Ew. Ew.
I'm a sex therapist. It is really hard to have me react with disgust or cringe when talking about sex. But this title gave me the ick, as the kids say.
Absolutely.
Your reaction was exactly mine, just, oh, no.
Remember when we heard that recording of Dobson?
Same. This is the same reaction because we know he said those words.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like, surely I'm going to call this chapter The Art of Making Love. That recording where he was like, mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've now heard his voice, and now you can't escape it.
No. Never forget.
No.
In his Dobson way, there's actually one good-ish piece of advice that I want to point out. I think it is interesting how it is both wrong and right. Quote, men in particular would be wise to recognize that because of the critical physical and emotional differences between men and women, a woman's sexual desire is aroused by means of those relational types of activities, holding hands, eye contact. A man can contribute immeasurably to his wife's sexual enjoyment while enhancing his own by giving time and attention to her emotional needs. He should make plenty of time for romance outside of the bedroom. He should understand that fatigue is a sexual inhibitor and help his wife find opportunities for emotional and physical restoration. Okay, so again, the gender centralist stuff is dumb and wrong. But a man can contribute immeasurably to his wife's sexual enjoyment while enhancing his own by giving time and attention to her emotional needs is useful, I think, for two reasons. I've said it before on this podcast, I'll say it again. Men want romance. Men want foreplay. Maybe they don't know that they want this, but their sexual satisfaction significantly increases with these factors.
Mm-hmm.
The motivations Dobson prescribes are bad, but the end result can be good. Another right wrong.
Who wrote that book right there? Come As You Are.
Emily
Nagoski?
Yes, Emily Nagoski.
Okay, everybody read Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. It has this exact idea of like, I think she uses the analogy of like brakes and accelerators.
Yes.
And it is about people's brakes and accelerators, right? Yeah. And people who need more like of a ramp up time, people who need more romance, people who don't, and how to make that work when there's like some sexual incompatibility or just differences. Mm-hmm. It's not about men and women specifically.
It's not about the pubis and the vagina.
That's right. That's right.
Also, these quotes implicitly say that men should care about the sexual satisfaction of their wife. And perhaps it's obvious, but it should by no means be taken for granted in evangelical writings. Sex is somewhat regularly referred to euphemistically as a wife's duty. Her pleasure is not often at the forefront. So while this advice is complicated and bad for a lot of reasons, at least it's like you should care if your wife enjoys sex, which I guess is something.
Yeah. Well, especially in these natalist times I've been hearing about. Yeah. Which I know also my sense is, thanks to the podcast, that this stems from this same kind of white Christian nationalism. It's this, yeah, you should have that. It's this, a bunch of things. There's policy changes, a bunch of strategies that are about having white Christian people have more babies, many of which come down to reducing women's rights so that the obligation to be sexual with your husband is like on the table. I know. It's terrible and terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Gross.
Yeah. you will hear, including people like our vice president just killed the Pope Vance,
Yes.
talk about the declining birth rates. They're talking about white people's birth rates,
Yes.
right? But it's all connected to the same idea. So that's most of this book. I want to save some time at the end about like, what's the truth? And I think we've done a good job kind of deconstructing some of these things as we go along. But I want to pose the central question to both of you. What advice do you have for people to help them maintain or grow intimacy in their relationships?
I would start with getting to know yourself. Jake, you mentioned this earlier along the way. I think so much of the ways that I went wrong in my own relationship development journeys was expecting my partners to know my needs without me knowing them.
Yeah.
And I think so much goes wrong. And I think this crosses gender, so it applies for everybody. If we don't know what we need, what we want, what we like, what we're interested in, then the people around us are not going to be able to know. And the fantasy of having those needs intuited is bad for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Brooke?
I think recognizing patterns, right? And sometimes I talk with people about like when it's not just a pattern, but you're in the shortcut of the pattern. So you go right to the like yucky part of it immediately, right? And so recognizing patterns, being able to stop and be like, oops, we're in this and let's explore it. I also talk to people a lot about like the 3 circles of a relationship, like you, me, the relationship, and all 3 need care, right? And they are all 3 separate things.
Another thing that comes to my mind is when people are in a really hard place in a relationship, sometimes I see people punishing each other when maybe the goal is I want things to be better, but the energy is I'm punishing you. And I think that's just an opportunity for self-reflection to say, am I actually coming to the table trying to repair, trying to recover, or am I trying to hurt you because I'm hurt? And I think that, it's just something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I think another thing I would say, readers who might be listening and need this, is it is never too early to come to couples therapy or relationship therapy. And actually, you probably don't want to wait until things have gotten bad, like as a last resort. You want to come when there's still a lot of stuff in your relationship that's working and good.
Yeah, or that you haven't even established the patterns yet.
Right.
And because I was raised Catholic specifically, but Christian broadly, and I think there might be some hesitance when it feels like something's being sold, and I can appreciate that. I would say think of it as a bargain because what I find when I work with people who are new to a relationship is that we're co-creating stuff together, so it tends to be short-term work.
Yeah.
And we are genuinely not here to keep you here. It is our goal to set you up with some healthy patterns and send you on our way. Sadly, we are very, very busy. We do not need you to hang around. We just want to set you up with good patterns so that when you come back along the way because things are challenging, you're already coming from a healthy place.
Yeah.
Right.
Some of my favorite relationship therapy that I've ever done are people in premarital counseling.
Totally.
Yeah.
Where it's like, we just want to make sure that when we're stepping into this next stage of our relationship, it doesn't have to be marriage specifically, but whatever the next stage is, that we're doing it right.
Yeah.
And for the most part, if you're thinking about that, you're probably doing a lot of
You're
things
doing
right.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always feel bad when I talk to individual clients and about their relationships, and I say, have you considered couples counseling? And they say, well, I don't think things are that bad yet. And I'm like, oof, that's not when you go.
Totally.
I mean, it can be, but
Sure.
Yeah.
I have some things, some of them are things that you've already said, like have a good life apart from your partner. Bring back exciting stories from them. A healthy level of distance does make the heart grow fonder. Differentiation.
Totally.
Similarly, learn to soothe yourself when your partner's upset. Don't try to fix their emotions because they make you uncomfortable. Step into the world. Does your partner like to play Halo? Play Halo with them.
Yeah.
Do they have a weird obsession about reading abusive evangelical propaganda? Ask them questions about it.
We love you, boyfriend.
Be honest and vulnerable about your emotions, but don't try to make them fix it for you. None of my suggestions are exclusive to romantic relationships either.
That's
Totally.
right.
I think the world could stand to value friendships and community a little bit more.
Cheers to that.
Yep, absolutely.
The very last thing, my supervisor is also a marriage and family therapist, and she's incredible. I love her very much. One of the frames...
And she's my supervisor, and I love her very much.
Yeah, she's great.
We'll make her come on and tell us who her favorite is.
I make her say I'm her favorite at the end
Of course.
I think
do.
you're the favorite.
Of course, Brooke makes her say it every time.
But one of the frames that she has given me in in couples therapy that I use quite a lot is like, what is your part in this? It's not about assigning blame, right? It's not you did this or I did this, but how do you contribute to some of these patterns that are not working for you? And also, how do you contribute to the patterns that are working for you?
Totally.
This book in general was a nice relief for me, as it was the least hostile and openly violent book we've read in a hot second. I enjoyed getting to talk about the basics of couple therapy and the Gottmans, but still, this book is bad.
Mm-hmm.
The underlying assumptions and frames, particularly that men should have power in their marriage and women exist primarily to support him, is present even in the good pieces of advice. I have 3 different recommendations for books that are much better than this. One is called 8 Dates, Essential Conversations for a Lifetime of Love by John and Julie Gottman.
I forgot I'm reading that one currently.
Brooks Books, continued. Again, I do not necessarily endorse the Gottmans and the Gottman method, but...
Tell us your critiques. We're here for it.
Not on the podcast. They're kind of culty.
Mm-hmm. Totally,
and
yes.
They're also like very like heteronormative, not great for polyamory. I don't know that they are Christian, but you can see some like Christian influences in them. Also,
in the 4 horsemen of the relationship of
yeah.
For
example.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Also, it does always feel like they're trying to sell me something.
Totally. I think this point is valid about almost any of the certification programs where it's like, how can we make this commodity as inaccessible as possible and make as much money off of it as possible?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The second book is called Hold Me Tight, 7 Conversations for a Lifetime of Love by Sue Johnson. And Conversations for a Lifetime of Love is the subtitle for both books. Something about MFTs. Sue Johnson developed emotion-focused therapy, which is actually my preferred style of relationship therapy.
I got to meet her once.
Really?
Yes, I did.
That's amazing.
At the Wisconsin Association of Marriage and Family Therapy Conference.
And the third is called How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids by Jancee Dunn. It's for a particular audience, I will say. But if you're in that audience, particularly like suburban moms, I think you'll really get a lot out of it. It's more narrative than therapeutic. There are so many people who actually know what they're talking about. Don't waste your time with this garbage. I want us to end with one last quote from this horrible book. Dobson has an extended story of a pastor and one of his friends who was very well known for being a stand-up man of God, famous pastor and preacher, an inspiration to us all, etc. This is how Dobson talks about his wife. Quote, "She must have been an incredible lady. Of her many gifts and attributes, I am most impressed by her awareness of the role she played in strengthening and supporting her husband. He is a powerful Christian leader today. Who would have believed that he needed his wife to build and preserve his confidence? But that's the way that men are made." At the end of the day, according to Dobson, women exist primarily to help their husbands do important things.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, and so many more, I hate James Dobson.
Hate James Dobson.
I hate James Dobson.
Corina, thank you so much for joining us on this misadventure.
Corina.
Gladly. I tell you, it is not as traumatizing to me as it is to others. I enjoy it very much.
Well, that's because you got an easy one. Jake, I'm not convinced. I think you love James Dobson now. I was ready for a fight today.
Wait for next episode.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Corina will be joining us for our next episode.
Yay!
Make sure to check out Lessons from the Couch. I cannot recommend it enough.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Brooke.
Yay.
We'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
I Hate James Dobson is a labor of love. Written, recorded, edited, and produced by me, Jake. I'm honored to be joined by my amazing co-host, Brooke. If you're enjoying the show, please consider rating and reviewing it. And if you want to connect with us more, you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, and Blue Sky at I Hate James Dobson, and unfortunately still on Twitter at I Hate JDobs. If you want to email us, you can do so at ihatejamesdobson@gmail.com. Special thanks, as always, to Drew, Lindsay, DJ, and Jack. Our theme music is by Mood Maze, and the song is called Trendsetter. Thank you for enjoying the show. welcome to I Hate James Dobson. Be cool, guys. My boss is here.
That's my favorite.